Welcome to Back to the Bible with pastor and Bible teacher Bryan Clark. All this month, Bryan will be focusing on the birth of Christ. We trust this will deepen your relationship with God as you prepare your heart for the true meaning of Christmas. Now let's join Bryan for today's inspiring message.
One of the great things about Christmas is the music, and I'm always impressed by a number of the Christmas carols and the depth of theology that they have. They really do tell the story all the way from the manger through the crucifixion to the exaltation of Christ. There are other carols that maybe don't capture it quite as well. We're all familiar with the old Christmas carol, We Three Kings, and not a bad carol, just isn't quite accurate. The opening line is, "We three kings of Orient are," and they weren't kings, and there probably weren't three of them, and they weren't from the Orient. But other than that, it's pretty much got it. They were actually magi, which would have been more like astronomers, as we call them, the wise men. That's a good description of them. And there probably were more than three. Mr. Wearsby told me after the last service that there were actually four. The fourth one was a Southern Baptist, and he carried a covered dish. So that may be. By the 6th century, they had names. They were identified with certain races. But all of that is really just legend. We really don't know how many there were. And they weren't from the Orient. They were from probably modern-day Turkey, up in that area. Some people think they were descendants of Daniel, and that may have been their awareness of the star and the Messiah and so forth. But I do marvel at those magi who were willing to sacrifice so much of their lives in order to travel with these expensive gifts, in order to see this baby born King of the Jews for only a moment. They were only there a short time and would have traveled months and months at great personal expense, traveling under very difficult circumstances for that moment. What's interesting about that is what they were willing to sacrifice to see the baby king for a moment, yet what little people today are willing to sacrifice to enter into a lasting relationship with that same Jesus. Sometimes when we think about kings, we think of kings as being inaccessible. Last January, Carrie and I were in Thailand, and Thailand is ruled by a king, and there was evidence of this king everywhere. There were palaces, there were pictures. It was obvious that there was a king, but the king was completely inaccessible. We couldn't go up and have a chat with the king, nor could the Thai people. He was completely inaccessible. What a radical difference between a human king and the king of the universe who made himself so incredibly accessible to all who choose to seek him. This past week, sadly to say, I was at the mall, and I was there with one of my daughters, and while she was shopping, I was sitting in the mall, and noticed this long, long line in the mall of people waiting to visit with Santa Claus, waiting with their children, I think, to sit on Santa's lap and go through the whole routine. And the line was extremely long. I suppose the wait was well over an hour. And I found myself thinking, they'll stand in this crowded mall under these conditions in order to sit on Santa's lap, and I wondered how many of them would be willing to sacrifice at all in order to meet that same Jesus that was there in that manger that first Christmas day. The fourth theme of Advent is Jesus as the King, represented by the lighting of the fourth Advent candle. And I want to talk about that this morning. I want to talk about who this King is. And I want to try to convince you why you would want to know this King, why it would be worth sacrificing whatever was necessary to sacrifice in order to know this King intimately. But before we talk about that, I want to ask you a few questions. Have you ever felt that life was just kind of boring? Just kind of the humdrum, the routine, you just start cranking out one day after another, and yesterday was like the day before, and it just kind of starts to seem routine, it starts to seem kind of boring, and you find yourself wondering if there isn't more to life than just kind of cranking it out day after day after day. Or have you ever found yourself needing guidance, needing some advice? Maybe this Christmas season you're making some very critical decisions. Maybe those are related to your family or your marriage, or maybe they're related to your business or your finances, or maybe moving somewhere else or changing careers. And you find yourself really seeking some help, some guidance, some counsel in making those decisions. Or perhaps this Christmas season there's something in your life that just seems overwhelming. Something that just seems impossible. Some of you are wrestling with issues with your kids, and they just seem kind of impossible. It seems like nothing's going to change. Some of you, it's related to your marriage. Some of you, it's a health problem. But it just is something in your life that seems impossible. And in a sense, you're kind of losing hope. Or what about those disappointments of life? For some reason, Christmas is just a real common time to intensify disappointments. Those things in life that just don't go the way we want them to go, and struggling with the realities of life. For some of you this Christmas, it will be a lonely Christmas. It will be a time of disappointment. You'll look back and remember Christmas has gone by. Some of you parents will remember when your kids were little and those magical moments on Christmas morning. And for you, they're just a memory, and Christmas won't be like that this year. Some of you have lost spouses or loved ones this year, and you know this Christmas is going to be very, very hard. And then, what about stress and anxiety? Any of you got any stress in your life? Any anxiety, anything that keeps you awake at night? Anything that causes you to search for something that will quiet that storm within? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, if any of those resonate and you say, you know, I can identify with that, then I'll guarantee you this is a king that you want to know, because this king addresses every single one of those situations.
You're listening to Back to the Bible. If you'd like to listen again, you'll find today's program along with older messages at backtothebible.org. And while you're there, browse our devotions, Bible studies, and Bible plans. You'll find a wide variety there, all designed to help you experience a deeper relationship with Jesus. That's at backtothebible.org. Visit today, backtothebible.org. Now let's return to our program.
So I'd like to invite you to turn to Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6 as we find out in the next few minutes why wise men still seek him. The prophet Isaiah writes in chapter 9 verse 6, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders." That's marking him as the king. "And his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace." The opening statement in verse 6 reminds us that this was a God-man. This was humanity and deity coming together. A child will be born is a statement of his humanity. A son will be given is a statement of his deity. The two come together to introduce this king. And then Isaiah goes on to record 5 names that this king will be called. In the ancient culture, names were not just labels that parents stuck on their kids, but names were descriptions of the character of the person. And that is certainly true with the names of God. The names of God are descriptions of God. It reveals who he is. So in this case, by looking at the 5 names for God, we have a description of God. We find out who is this king and what difference does it make in our lives today. His name will be called Wonderful. Now, I know there's debate about whether it's wonderful or wonderful counselor, so you kind of look at where the comma is. In the Hebrew, you can't really tell. We can't tell if it's an adjective or if it's a noun. I think it's a noun. I think it is wonderful, comma, counselor, comma, and I think there's good biblical support for that. For example, in the book of Judges, The angel of the Lord was having a discussion with Gideon. The angel of the Lord would have been Jesus pre-incarnate, meaning Jesus before he was born in the manger. And in that conversation, Gideon asked him what his name is, and he says, "Why do you ask my name when you know it is wonderful?" So there is good biblical support for wonderful as a name of God. I would go so far as to say I think it's actually even kind of a category heading, saying that God is wonderful. He's wonderful in his counsel. He's wonderful in his power. He's wonderful in his eternality. He's wonderful in his peace. So it, in a sense, sets the tone for the rest of the names. But what does it mean that his name is wonderful? It means just what it sounds. His name is wonder-filled. That raises us above the monotony of life. It takes us beyond the boredom and the routine and the drudgery of life, where it feels like one day just turns into another day, and we find ourselves thinking there's got to be more to life than this. And the reality is that there is. The one who causes us to wonder moves our lives from the explainable to the unexplainable, from the boredom to the wonder, the mystery of who he is. Mr. Wiersbe, in his book on worship, talks about a study that was done that determines that between the ages of 5 and 7, our creativity or our sense of wonder diminishes by 90%. Just this all-out plunder from extremely creative to not very creative at all. Goes on to say that by the time you reach 40 years of age, or my age, I'm 41, I have 2% of the creativity I had when I was 5 years old. Now some of you are saying, yeah, we know that. That's true of you too, though, by the way. It is amazing how this sense of wonder just kind of crashes as we grow older. And suddenly we find ourselves living lives of boredom and drudgery, and we dwell in the realm of the explainable, in the realm of the known. It's been interesting over the last decade or so. There was a movement that was fueled by what we call humanism that believed eventually we could figure everything out as humans. Eventually we could solve all the problems. We could figure out the universe. But with more and more technology in the world of science, what we're realizing today is not what we know. What we're realizing is what we don't know. Because it just continues to open up a world that becomes more and more awesome, more and more wonder-filled. And we find ourselves asking the question, how big is this God? Our lives need to be filled with a sense of wonder, with a sense of mystery, going beyond the explainable in this world to that which can't be explained, which takes our life to a new level, to a new height. This past Thursday night, I was out on the farm, and it was into the evening, and I was messing around with my Toyota and messed around just a little bit too much and got stuck in a snowbank, and I had to call Mark to come pull me out. So while I was waiting to be rescued, it was pitch black. There wasn't anything to do but wait, and I was just standing on the road, and I was staring up into the night sky, and the sky was absolutely clear, and there's something about having the ground covered with snow that just seems to intensify a night sky. And I found myself again just lost in the wonder of this universe and asking myself this question, how big is this God? There needs to be a sense of wonder in our lives that takes us beyond the ordinary to traffic in the realm of the mysterious. And there's only one way to get there, and that is to know the King whose name is wonderful.
You're listening to Back to the Bible. If you'd like to listen again, you'll find today's program along with older messages at backtothebible.org. And while you're there, browse our devotions, Bible studies, and Bible plans. You'll find a wide variety there, all designed to help you experience a deeper relationship with Jesus. That's at backtothebible.org. Visit today, backtothebible.org. Now let's return to our program.
Well, his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor. This deals with the decisions in life. This deals with the need for guidance in life. This deals with the answers to our questions in life. It amazes me in our culture all of the different places where people will seek counsel. They will seek guidance. They will seek answers to their questions. Today, people go to astrologers. They go to their horoscope. They go to a psychic hotline. Thousands, millions of dollars are spent on these psychic hotlines as people are trying to find answers to their problems. I was told last night that there's one lady that is on the radio, and you call in and she puts cream in her coffee, and depending on what it does in her coffee, I guess, she tells you your future. Well, that seems pretty reliable, doesn't it? She's probably the one that's controlling the stock market right now. And I suppose if she drinks her coffee black, that means you have no future. I don't know what that means. But the sad thing is people listen to that and people buy into that. People go to all kinds of strange places to try and find guidance in life. One of my pet peeves would be what I would call celebrity advisors. People that are celebrities, and because they're famous, people assume that they have some wisdom to impart. So they go on talk shows, and they have radio shows and TV shows, and they write books, and basically they're telling people how to live. Even though their lives are a total mess, they are determined to tell other people how to live. So you have someone on a nightly talk show that just got out of a detox center that's been married 5 times, and they're telling you how you should live. And I'm thinking there's probably something wrong with this picture. I don't know how many of you remember Marcus Welby, MD, the old television show. When Robert Young played Marcus Welby, MD, I just read this in an article, he received approximately 5,000 letters per week asking him for medical advice. Now, was there a problem with this? This man was not a doctor, he was an actor. But you see the same thing today on commercials. You have people who play a doctor on a television show doing commercials about medicine because people are convinced that they have some medical expertise. It never dawns on them that these people just read it right off a script. Well, all of that indicates people's desperate need to try and find answers in a very confusing culture. But what if I was to tell you that you could have a personal advisor? You could have a personal counselor with you 24 hours a day, knows the beginning from the end, never has to guess, loves you more than you can imagine, and is never wrong. Well, that is what you do have when you seek the King whose name is Counselor. So it's shocking that people would look any other direction for counsel than to seek this King. God speaks to us through His Word. He speaks to us through His Spirit that dwells within us. He speaks to us through other believers. But make no mistake, He does speak to us, and He longs to guide our lives that we make right decisions if we will seek Him. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God. Mighty God refers to His unlimited power. The fact that this is a God of the impossible. There is no situation that is too hard, no situation that is too hopeless for this God. What do you have going on this Christmas season that seems overwhelming, seems hopeless? Again, it might have something to do with one of your children, and it seems like nothing's going to change. Might have to do with your marriage, your family. Might have to do with a disease that you or a loved one's dealing with. Might have to do with your finances or your job. Whatever it might happen to be, nothing is impossible with God. There is no such thing as hopeless. There is no situation that is too hard. You know, when that baby king grew up and walked on this earth, He made the blind to see, and he made the lame to walk, and he cast out demons, and he forgave sins, and he calmed the sea, and he raised the dead. So remind me, what is it that you're dealing with that is too hard for this king? You know, when the angel was talking to Mary, telling her that you are going to have the Christ child, even though you've never had relations with a man, Mary said, "How can this be?" And the angel responded, "Because with God, nothing is impossible." It is interesting, too, how these descriptions of God all kind of bleed together. I mentioned earlier that I think wonderful could kind of be a category heading, because if we truly are people of wonder, and we wonder in this realm of the mysterious and enlarge our view of God, we have no doubt concerning his ability to guide our lives, and we certainly have no doubt about his power to deal with whatever there is in my life that needs to be dealt with. When I stand on that road and I look at the night sky, and I am once again in awe of the vastness of the universe, and I realize that God created that with a spoken word, it reminds me there's nothing in my life too hard for God. So they all began to kind of bleed together as we develop this relationship with this king. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father. You say, well, now I don't get that one. If he's the Son, then how come he's the Father? Well, it's a good question. Isn't very hard to answer, though. In the Hebrew language, as a matter of fact, in the ancient Near East in general, the concept of a father really carried with it the idea of an originator. So it wouldn't be limited to the concept of a father as we think of it, but an originator. So, for example, when Satan was called the father of lies, what was being said is he is the originator of lies. So when Jesus is called the everlasting Father, he's being called the originator of eternity. In other words, he is the author of eternity. He has always been, always will be.
You're listening to Back to the Bible. If you'd like to listen again, you'll find today's program along with older messages at backtothebible.org. And while you're there, browse our devotions, Bible studies, and Bible plans. You'll find a wide variety there, all designed to help you experience a deeper relationship with Jesus. Visit today, backtothebible.org.